Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm going to be doing a critique of one of the forum members over at the Sycra.net forums. Alright, so here we have a character design of this girl who's into martial arts, and we know that because she's holding nunchucks, and she has the hairband, which signify that she's into kung fu fighting. And overall, I really like, the presentation. You've got some nice clean line work here. I would worry about the line width a little bit. It's a bit uneven in places because it gets thick in places and thin in other places, and the coloring is okay as well. There's some issues with color harmony, especially on her belt, and some areas, like with the nunchucks being so close to the belt and them being of similar color. This is something called a tangent, when two things they seem to be connecting in a way that you don't intend them to be. So when I look from far and squint my eyes, for instance, the nunchucks really blend into the belt, and that's a tangent. Another tangent would be something like on her hand here. You can see how there's this line of her thumb, and then this line on her hand to indicate like where the knuckles are, and that forms a line. That's also a tangent, and that's something you might want to avoid. But my biggest problem with this isn't the line work or the coloring. It's actually something much more fundamental. So I'm not even going to be dealing with the colors at all. The big problem is the drawing, and this is something that I'm always having to go over, and it gets kind of frustrating having to keep saying, it's a drawing, it's a drawing, it's a drawing. And I really wish people would spend more time on getting the drawing working and a bit less time, in the beginning anyway, in getting like a nice finished piece. Because I know it's nice to have that finished piece. But I like to think of it like sword fighting. Like if you want to learn how to fight with a real sword that's very sharp, you're not going to start with that, right? You're going to start with a wooden sword, because if you start with a sharp sword, you're going to injure yourself. And it's not as severe when you think about art. It's not like you're going to, use your pencil and then cut off someone's arm or something by accident. But what it is costing you is time. And maybe when you're young, it doesn't feel like this is very important. But as you get older, you'll realize how little time you have and how important your time is. And so you might spend, a couple hours cleaning up a piece and coloring it when you could have done a couple of drawings in that time. And I think the drawings would have been a wiser use of your time. So let me just go ahead and point out some of the issues I'm seeing. So first of all, with the head, there's some issues with the feature placement. You look at this eye and this eyeball, and if her eyes are, unless they're really bulging out, you've got this thing going on here, where I would rather the eyes be in eye sockets. And let's see, if we connect these eyes and we get the nose, it's sort of, you've got an issue with the lines of the face being sort of wonky as well. So that's something to tackle right away. It's to think about, okay, so yes, you have a structure underneath this, right? And if the person's looking towards us, I would recommend getting where those eyes are in the eye sockets first, and then building it from there. And you'll have eyes that are more correctly placed within the features. So that's one thing. The next thing are some anatomy issues, like here, for example, you've got this where the arm's coming down, and then you've got this sort of, this thing, it's almost like a webbed area. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I know what you're trying to do, but it's not coming across. And the anatomy issue is this. Okay, so we've got a head, right? So we've got a head, and then it's attached to a neck. And the neck attaches to a collarbone. And the collarbone is, it starts at the sternum. And your sternum goes, like this is the center line. Your sternum goes down here. And then you have collarbones. and the collarbones connect to the arms, the arm bones, which come down. Now, you have the pectoralis muscles, the chest muscles, and they connect like this, and you have the bicep, and then what you have is behind, or you have a rib, all this is on a rib cage, and then behind that you have the latissimus, and it's going like this and connecting into here. So it creates this shape, not this shape. And what you're doing here is you're confusing things because I guess you aren't really sure about the anatomy. So if we wanted to correct that, what we would do is bring this in like that. And if you wanted a line separating it, it would go like this, not what you originally had. So things like this are important. The same with the hand, right? Like this doesn't look like it's holding on to these nunchucks properly. It looks very confusing. And so what I would do is really think about this as a form. And I see that you're thinking about it in a way with your forms, but it's very simplistic and it's a little bit incorrect, where, you know, you've got the hand coming down here and then coming over. Like if we simplified this into a simple shape, you would have something more like this than how you have it right now. And even this, it's sort of an awkward way of holding on to things, so you'd probably want to change that. And then you've got some issues with, or a lot of issues with just, you know, well, here's some issues. You've got this is going around a circle, which is good. I mean, it's like it's close, but not quite. Because what this is doing is it's saying the perspective is this way, right? Like we are looking down at a cylinder, and the cylinder is at this angle. Meaning that here, this is going at this angle, and I mean, all these things are to be like, okay, so we're looking down at this, so that means we're looking, our horizon is above this point, and then we should be really looking down on these. And I mean, you've got it so we've got angles going this way, which is confusing. See with these, they're going around like this, and then they're going down like that. Like the down part is fine, but it's a lot of confusion. So that's another thing. And again, that's something you'll get with just more mileage in drawing and more study. You want to look at reference, or look at life, or I mean, look at yourself in a mirror and try and see these things, or else do more, you know, very basic, simple forms where you have characters, and, you know, I mean, maybe you're already doing this, because it doesn't look like you're completely new to this idea, but you do want to consider these things of your characters and where the perspective is, and, you know, what are we looking down on and what are we looking up at, right? Okay, so the next thing that's important is or are the folds, because the folds are very confusing to me, and it seems like you've got a sense of folds but not an understanding of how they work. So for instance, you've got a lot of folds on this tank top, or else it could be some kind of pattern or design that I'm not understanding, but okay, I may be wrong, but I'm going to assume these are folds and these lines are supposed to be folds as well, and these lines are supposed to be folds. If there's some kind of design, again, I may be wrong, but I'm just going to treat it like they're folds, and I hope you intended it for them to be folds. So when you have folds, think of it this way. Folds happen because, okay, let's say there's a sheet, right? This is just a sheet, and we're going to compress this into this much space. We're going to take this to this. Well, it's going to have, for this to get into this space, it's going to have to fold to occupy that space. And so that's what's happening. Something else is like, let's say you have a ball and you have a sheet above that ball, and the sheet falls down. Well, what's going to happen? Well, the sheet is going to end up covering this ball, right? But what's going to happen is the folds are going to appear at a certain spot, and it's not going to be at the top of this ball, because what's going to happen is the folds will appear off the areas of tension. So it's tense around the ball, where the sheet is touching the surface of the ball, that's tense, and then where it's not, that's relaxed, right? So what happens is you get the folds at the areas where it's not, there's not tension pulling against it, right? So you get something like this. So for instance, with your breasts, you've got it so that the tension, and just fixing that ball, so you get the idea, right? So you have a sheet and it falls, and then you get something more like that. You don't have a defined point of where the tension is. You just have folds all over the place. But think of it like the ball. Okay, so you have the round part where the fabric's touching that round surface. That's not going to get the fold. So none of this area is going to be having folds, really. It's going to be free of folds, and this is going to be covered as well. Now, between the breasts, it's a bit different, because that's like if I have a ball and another ball, and yes, the surface is taut against these two, but then between those you might get some folds. So you might get some folds here, but not really so much on the breasts themselves. And then here as well, you might get some folds here, right? But they're not going to be going all over the place. It's much more specific where they go. And I mean, one way of learning this is just practicing and observing. Another way is observing from life over time. Another way is to actually just look at them, you know, like study jeans. Like, okay, high-waisted jeans, where are the folds going to be? Well, usually with jeans, try and keep your forms, there's certain parts where the folds will be. There tends to be folds here, and they tend to go horizontal, and then so this is the part which is rounded, so that's not where the folds would be, but then here's a crease. Where things move, that's where you often get folds. So around the knees, and then also where things are not touching the form anymore. So here the form is pressed against this calf, right? The jeans. But then here it stops being pressed against it, so now you'll have some folds. And same for here. So here it's pressed against, here it's pressed against, and then here it's parts in between two forms, because you've got the forms of the legs, which are sort of like, let's simplify them to cylinders, and you have this area here in the crotch area, and then you have this form going around and then sort of straightening out and then going around, and then here you would have the forms going from this form to this form. So you want to think of it like that, and the same thing for you know, things like this going around. I mean, you've done a pretty good job. So again, you're on the right track, but I would rather see you do a lot more drawings and a lot less finished work. Like, because remember, this takes time, and instead work on your anatomy, work on your understanding of folds, work on your proportions and stuff, and this will really, really pay off. So that's really the big critique, I guess, is that I get why you would want to do stuff like this. I get why it's fun to have finished work, and you're doing good with this. But what that shows me is you can pick color up pretty easily at a later date. Like, that's not going to run away from you. And neither is, clean line work. That's not going to be something that, if you focus more on just drawing, doing many, many drawings over and over again, studying, looking at life, looking at how structures work, like the breasts, right? Looking, okay, so how do breasts actually function? How do they connect? If this is a center line, this is going to be going over, and then, what actually shows. Figure that stuff out, and I think you'll be using your time much more wisely. So, hope this helped, and thanks for watching.